raising their hands. Today's generation is constantly fed by a specific propaganda, a narrative that paints our ancient tradition as oppressive or unscientific. We have been conditioned by a colonial mindset to view menstruation only through a clinical or taboo lens, completely ignoring the spiritual or physiological depth of Rajaswala state. Today, we aim to stripe away those layers of misinformation and look at the profound wisdom that was actually intended by our ancestors. Moving from the stigma we are taught today, back to the sacredness that truly exists. To help us navigate this understanding, we are deeply honored to welcome Sri Nithin Sridhar Ji. He is a multifaceted scholar, author, and researcher. Professionally trained as a civil engineer, he chose to dedicate his life to the study and dissemination of Sanatan Dharma. Currently, he serves as the director of Indica Center for Moksha Studies and was formerly the editor of India Facts, where he extensively worked on debunking media bases and distorted history. While he is widely recognized for his groundbreaking and meticulously researched book, Menstruation Across Cultures, a historical perspective, his other contributions include Isavasya Upanishad, Samanya Dharma, The Priminal Shakti, Musings on Hinduism. Now I request this distinguished speaker to bless us with his knowledge.
Thank you very much for the invite. Very happy to be here. Before I begin, let me just share my presentation. Just give me a moment. Is the screen visible, the presentation?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Thank you again for inviting me and kindly organizing this session. This is a topic that I have worked very closely, and so therefore it is close to my heart, I would say. But let me first begin with a prayer. Vakratunda Mahakaya Koti Surya Samaprabha Nirvikram Kurume Deva Sarvakaryeshu Sarvada Om Jayanti Mangala Kali Bhadrakali Kapalini Durga Kshama Shiva Dhatri Swaha Swadha Namostute Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyomavad Vyapta Dehaya Shri Dakshinamurtaye Namaha Bharati Karuna Patram Bharati Padabhushanam Bharati Padamarudham Bharati Tirthamashraye Vidya Vinaya Sampannam Vitaragam Vivekinam Vande Vedanta Tattvagam Vidshekara Bharatim Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Hari Om. So today I'll be speaking on the Bharatiya view on menstruation. This actually draws from, there is a very big section in my book, Menstruation Across Cultures, where I dedicate, I think that is perhaps the biggest section in the book, and the most original research on the topic, one of the earliest book on the topic, which is about the Bharatiya view or the Hindu view on menstruation. It is very, in a sense, intriguing, but also it is funny that today the contemporary narrative, the discourse, or even the very prevalent understanding of our own traditions and practice. So as Bharatiyas, ideally, all of us should have you should ideally do not need this presentation at all. We should already have this knowledge about what is our practice regarding menstruation, or what is the basis of those practices, what is the philosophy of guiding those practices, what is the rationale behind those practices, and most importantly, what is the utility of these practices. But unfortunately, owing to our colonial history and the subsequent adoption of Eurocentric values, Eurocentric worldview, uh, despite being, perhaps the most ancient civilization and having the most ancient dharma, the Sanatana Dharma, as the uh, as the core of our civilization, despite being such a the only ancient civilization that is continuing even today, flourishing even today, despite all this, we have been colonized in our mind. We have great misunderstandings about our own cultures and practices. So, and I think there is no area which is where it is most visible than with respect to the dharmic practices surrounding women, especially the menstruation practices. The idea, the very prevalent idea that Hindu dharma degrades women by considering menstruating women as impure and as being oppressive towards women. This is so widely prevalent. You just open YouTube and search, just put a search of menstruation, women, etc. You'll get hundreds of videos breaking the taboo, removing misconception, breaking the myth, and all of them as if parroting the same paradigm, same ideas, kind of dismiss the traditional beliefs and practices and ideas and knowledge that for example, our grandparents' generation or a generation before that, for whom it was a daily reality. So we are very, very, very eager to dismiss those ideas, and and one of the key argument is that menstruation is a purely biological process. Being in 21st century, we have moved from a very primitive uh, ideas, primitive society of the past. So we must discard all these taboos, all these primitive and superstitious practices. So this is the general idea. And this image, this is a tweet that the US Embassy Nepal tweeted in 2019. It doesn't matter in what year it was tweeted, but this pretty much captures the current narrative, how the world sees us, but most importantly, how we ourselves see our practice. So the unfortunate part is not about how the world sees us, because see, we all have our biases. We all when one culture judges another culture, we are always wearing our own hats. So when the outsider tries to judge us, it tells more about them than about us. But unfortunately, this is the kind of discourse that we have internalized, and we ourselves perceive this. So this is a very, very interesting image. As you see, they're wishing us, and the embassy wishes us for a Hindu festival, the Chat Parba, Tihar, and all. And for that, they kind of, this Dashain, while worshipping one Durga inside your house, make sure you are not sending another Durga outside because she is menstruated. So this explains a complexity of practices, a very multidimensional layer of Hindu practices reduced into a single picture and caricatured to and posited in a way wherein anybody who reads it, anybody who sees it, will immediately kind of develop soft corner for the girl outside. I mean, she is immediately we relate to her victimization. So she is a victim, the family is the perpetrator. How at a social level she is being excluded from family, from participating in a social get together. At the spiritual level, she is excluded from accessing spiritual methods such as puja, festivals, to express her love, devotion to Bhagavan, and practice adhyatmika or dharmika practices. So at every level, of course, anybody who sees this, anybody who reads this, immediately they think, yes, this is correct. Why should we today we are sitting in 21st century. Today we have all these means such as sanitary napkins, tampons, etc., to manage blood, to manage periods. So why should then we we should exclude our daughters, our sisters, etc., our mothers, etc., from our festival, our celebration and all. So this is the first idea. And this, it is this simple idea that has convinced hundreds of thousands of lakhs of people, especially in the urban scenario, lots of educated people to believe strongly that yes, some of our Hindu practices were rigid, were regressive, were problematic. Many also try to defend this by saying that we were living in a different time, so blood management was problematic, therefore certain practices came. Now because that condition is no longer there, so we should discard it. But end of the day, all the argument boils down to this. It is that perception that Hindu practices are not relevant today. They are kind of a superstition, or they are at least outdated to today's times and all those things. But is this the reality? I mean, if we have to judge truth from falsehood, what is the actual basis? We have to dig deeper than these perceptions, than this propaganda, than these narratives. So we have to ask deeper questions. Even forgetting all this negative propaganda and all these things are there, it is very natural for any girl, any woman, especially the young girls who just started their periods, to have these questions. I mean, apart from the normal questions such as, what is a period and all this, that scientifically the biological questions. What are the basis of cultural practices? Why it is done? Say our parents or grandparents would have told young women, don't do puja during periods, don't go to temple during periods, or don't do this, don't do that. So it is natural curiosity, natural human this, that we want to have knowledge before we perform any action, right? So that we all of us want to do things by having some knowledge, some basis, some orientation, and not just blindly, right? So this is a very important questions. These are very important questions. Unfortunately, it has been happened so that over the last 200, 300 years, uh, we have become so derooted, alienated from our own traditions and practices that our parents, our grandparents often did not have answers to these questions, because they kind of practice them without questioning them. Because of the nature of the times, there was no scope for such questioning. Perhaps it is very difficult to pinpoint what are the reasons. But nevertheless, for good or for worse, we are currently living in a time when we are constantly questioning, we are constantly interrogating the things that come to us, the things we are told to do, or and it is a good thing. I mean, the Bharatiya culture is rooted in the Vada tradition, in the tradition of even the oldest Vedic literature, the Upanishads and all. You will see it is all in the form of question and answer. The Nachiketa approaches Yama, and Yama asks questions, and Yama answers. So, and Yama in turn, there is interaction. So, right? It is never. It has always been a guru shishya. The interaction is the very heart of it, right? Also, moving forward, therefore, it is very important to not just to uh, interrogate the negative views of menstruation, but it is very important to understand our own practices, so that we can live as Bharatiyas, as Hindus, as Sanatana Dharmis, in a more enlightened way, in a more informed way, wherein we can then practice some of these practices for our own benefit. So every practice, everything, every tradition, every practice, it has to have some utility. If there is no utility, then that why should anybody practice it? That is a very common sensical question. And all our Shastra tradition of the whole Hindu tradition, he has very strong idea about action to serve some utility. Some phala has to be there, some prayojana has to be there. So this is at the very heart of it, heart of our dharma. So let us. I want to now, after giving the premise about all this negative narrative, I want to begin with in a exploratory manner rather than uh, uh, trying to respond to objections in a point wise, because that will come later, yeah. And once I'm hopeful that once my presentation is over, all of you will be equipped to arrive at your own responses to these narratives. So it is very important to understand our own practices, our own ideas and knowledge on its own basis, not from a Eurocentric lens. So for now, let us keep aside the hat of, say, for example, equality, or the biases that we may have, that this is discrimination, this is not correct. Let us keep all those ideas aside and approach it as truly as as curiosity, truly as a seeker to know what is it. Simply understand the answer to the question of what is the Hindu view of menstruation, or the Bharatiya view of menstruation practices, and what are its bases. So the most important idea that we need to understand is that the Hindu texts, the Bharatiya Jnana Parampara, which is today also called as Indian knowledge systems and traditions. So our knowledge tradition, our Shastra tradition, they perceive, they situate the discussion about menstruation within a larger category called Stri Dharma. There is not even a single place wherein the fact that menstruation is a biological process is anywhere rejected in our Shastras. So the people who say that menstruation is purely a biological process, they make it appear as if that our tradition, our practices, our culture do not see menstruation as a biological process. That makes no sense, right? Even from a common sense perspective, everybody knows it is a biological phenomenon. So, but there is deeper meaning to this biological phenomenon. So why? Because menstruation is something that women go through for at least 30-40% of their lives, one third of their lives, if not 50%, right? And it is something which is experienced again and again, month after month, and it is something which has deep relationship to fertility, motherhood, and which is something which is closely associated with the very notion of womanhood, right? So people say that women and men are same and all those things, but if everybody is same, then we don't need two different ideas or two different categories to represent, right? There should be something. Men and women are different. That is why we have the very term men and women, right? So one of the factors which, of course, to put it in a very simple language, to differentiate this is the biological differentiation. And menstruation is the fertility, motherhood. See, all these are very, very important characteristics that make a woman, right? A father can be a man can be a father, a brother, a son, right? Similarly, a woman is a mother, a wife, and a daughter or a sister, right? So we have a there is a distinction biologically, functionally, in very different ways, even psychologically. So these are all these are all the ideas which are very well known. And menstruation has been a very key identifier of this distinction, and hence across the world, it's not just in Indian society, but across the world throughout the history, it has always played a very key role in how in a society the man-woman relationship dimension works, be it within the family or outside the family, or how the role of the how women function within a society, or how her function or her role, her importance is perceived by the rest of the society. All these interdynamics questions, in all of them, the menstruation has played an important role. So if you read my book, I have all these very, very large chapters on different cultures, be it Egyptian, Greek, Rome, Mesopotamia, or in tribal cultures in Northern America, Southern America, Africa, or major religions such as Christianity, Islam, Judaism, all of them, how this menstruation was perceived, was understood, and those practices played out, I have dealt in great detail. So coming back, in the Indian cultural civilizational tradition, we perceive menstruation, we situate it in the larger category called Stri Dharma, and enunciate how it defines femininity and womanhood, and how it gives meaning, how it should be understood. So the very term Stri Dharma has two parts. The one is Stri. Stri means women. The dharma is the second part. So dharma, which is applicable to Stri, or which is in which is what is the dharma of a woman, or what is the method of a woman, the path of life for a woman, that is Stri Dharma. Similarly, we have Purusha Dharma for men, right? We can have Raja Dharma, right? What is the dharma of a king? What is the way of life for a king? What is the method to attain happiness for a king? Same things. The Stri part is specializing, is narrowing the focus to whom the discussion of dharma is there. But we have to first understand what is this dharma. Very simple definition is dharayate iti dharma. Dharma is that which upholds. What does upholding here mean? We have various definitions in a different text. One of the very simple definition is abhyudaya nishreyasa siddhihi. Dharma is that which results, which when practiced leads to attainment of abhyudaya nishreyasa. Abhyudaya means material welfare, happiness in this world, and happiness in the afterlife, that is swarga, what we call as swarga. And then nishreyasa is moksha, the ultimate spiritual welfare, what we today call as enlightenment, jnanam, moksha, liberation, emancipation. See, these are English terms. We will not go into all these ideas in depth. But basically, overall well-being, actions and lifestyle choices that facilitates an individual, when practiced, to take him or her to attain this overall well-being, that is dharma. So Stri Dharma is dharma concerning women, or those duties, those lifestyle choices, those actions that are rooted in womanhood and hence are unique to women and facilitate women to overall well-being is Stri Dharma. See how meaningful this is. If you are locating menstruation or menstruation related practices, the lifestyles, etc., within the category of Stri Dharma, then that means those practices are something which is seen, which is understood as imparting well-being to women, not something whose purpose is to curtail women, not something whose purpose is to restrict women, not something whose purpose is to degrade women, not something whose purpose is to oppress women or discard women, right? So it is part of Stri Dharma. In fact, it is called as Rajo Dharma. The Dharma Shastra text specifically speaks about Raja. Raja here means menstruation. Raja also means blood. Raja here means menstruation. Rajo Dharma is the phrase used in the Dharma Shastra tradition. Rajo Dharma means menstruation practices itself is a full-fledged practice of Dharma. It is a full-fledged comprehensive method of dharmic practice which can impart punyam or the karmic merit, which imparts well-being at the physical level, at the biological level, at the psychological level, and also at the level of karmic merit, that is punya. And it is a sacred process in itself. Right? More importantly, when the Shastra speaks about Stri Dharma or says that these are the practices that can come under Stri Dharma, here, or aligning the life to according to Stri Dharma implies that women do not deny her womanhood. So Stri Dharma is not a masculinization of women. We have today, unfortunately, in the name of equality, in the name of feminism, what is happening is basically either a masculinization of women and very funnily, a kind of a lesbianization of women. See, this is not something I'm putting out of the hat. There is one short monograph by a radical feminist arguing for the political need for feminists to be lesbians. See, this is what I have just said is straight out of that paper. So that is how the equality narrative is going. But contrary to all of them, how our Bharatiya Shastra Parampara conceptualized Sri Dharma, it is the Dharma of the women, for the women, by the women. It is Dharma that does not deny womanhood, but rather it does not pursue a utopian genderless identity, but rather, and it does not argue for argue or promote women, that women should escape their biology. Rather, it is something which respects womanhood, celebrates womanhood, and wants to facilitate women to attain overall well-being, material, spiritual, all kinds of well-being, without having to deny her own identity, her own feminineness. So it is in this context, within, as a subset of this Sri Dharma, there is Rajo Dharma. Unless we understand this conceptual placement of Rajo Dharma within the canvas of Sri Dharma, many of the practices and beliefs and the stories in our Vedas, Smritis, Puranas, and many other texts, be it Kama Shastra, Ayurveda, see, all of them provide a very multi-dimensional understanding of menstruation. Much of it will not make sense to us, and we will be reduced to caricaturing it as something anti-women without this conceptual understanding. So if you go through all these texts, all the ideas that I have listed, are the different dimensions of menstruation that you will see here. Ashaucha. Ashaucha, I'll explain. It's ritual impurity, but again, the term impurity itself is so loaded that it needs a lot of explanation. Ashaucha, austerity or tapas, rest, self-purification process, celebration. These are all the different dimensions of discourse present in our text related to menstruation. And it's not that they are in isolations. They are not in silos, but they have all been combined into a comprehensive narrative, different texts highlighting different aspects. So Ayurvedic texts will focus more on the health of the woman. The Dharma Shastra text will focus more on the religious aspects, the ritualistic aspects. Kama Shastra will focus more on the Kama aspect, whatever it is. So this is these ideas go back to the Vedas itself. In the Yajurveda, we have a wonderful story about how Indra, after killing Vishwarupa, who was a Brahmana, but who was giving, the story says that he was giving silently, he was betraying the Devatas and giving the Yagya Ahutis to Asuras, to strengthen the Asuras. So obviously Indra had to take action for the sake of preserving the order, maintaining peace in the world. So he slays that Vishwarupa. But being a Brahmana, killing of a Brahmana gives rise to, any killing for that matter, gives rise to karmic demerit or papam. And the killing of a Brahmana, especially a rishi such as that Vishwarupa, had great implications. It's called as Brahma Hatya. Brahmana Hatya gives us to Brahma Hatya, right? So this Brahma Hatya Papa, to get rid of it, the story says Indra approached Bhumi Devi. He approached the sap of the, he approached the trees, and he approached women. And all of them, all of them are the Stri Pratyas. They are all of a gender of female gender in this story. And all of them, in their great compassion, accepted Indra's request to take upon themselves the 1/3 of the Brahmahatya Papa. And in return, Indra gave them blessings. So the whole story goes in different cases. If in the case of Bhumi Devi, the Papa, the 1/3 Papa she took, manifested as fissures, etc. In turn, she was blessed that no matter how much mining, etc., that humans do, the earth will eventually recover on her own. So these are the different types it mentioned. But in the case of human women, the story says that the Brahmatya Papa Dosha manifested as menstruation, the periods. And in turn, she was blessed that after the completion of the 3 days of periods, the women will be able to conceive children. Now, and in that story, in that context, it also speaks about certain practices, how the menstruation, the women during her periods should not cook food, and how she should practice some sort of separation from the rest of the family, and many other ideas are there. But the very, very important aspect, the key function of this story is that it is a hermeneutic story. Basically, the purpose, the questions such as when did this happen, how could Indra do this, so all those questions are not useful to us, because the correct way to understand this story, this account in the Veda, is to understand what is the idea, what is the approach to menstruation that is to be taken. And the very first idea that it comes is, it compares menstruation with appearance of fissures on the earth. So it is acknowledging that it is a natural process, a biological process, a natural process. And then there is a deeper significance to the word Brahmahatya. So as I mentioned, the Brahmahatya happened from Brahmana Hatya, Brahmahatya and all. That is the story part. But just look at the term used, Brahmahatya. Brahma is also, we all know who is the Brahma, right? Brahma is the creator of the universe. So Brahma refers to the potential to manifest. Potential to manifest. What is actually happening in the biological process of menstruation? We all know this, that the woman's body every month prepare her for conception, for giving birth to the child. But when that conception does not happen, then the egg which was produced, it is then given up. right? The lining and everything is thrown out during the periods. So menstruation represents failure of conception, unutilization of the egg, which had the potential to give birth to life. Brahma Hatya, like a kind of a unrealization of a potential birth of a jivatma. And this comes with certain karmic demerits. It happens, it's a natural process, happens on its own, but because a jivatma which could have taken birth did not get the opportunity to take birth, so there is a kind of a karmic demerit. That is what is mentioned, that is what is told in the Shastra. And hence this Ashaucha and other aspects come into play. It's a very, the book has very great detail about the story. I won't go much more detail into that story, but what the story gives, if you read the full story, you will see that all these ideas, ashaucha, austerity, self-purification process, all of them come there itself. All of these ideas are present there itself in the story. So the story is not positing menstruation in a negative format. Despite saying that there is some karmic demerit, it also associates with the blessings that the women received from Indra. Blessings in the form of birth of a child. That after menstruation, she is able to conceive children. So that means again the cycle starts, right? Once the menstruation is over, the body again prepares the woman for another cycle for conception, right? So the story is hidden coding of a biological process, but it adds spiritual dimensions, the dharmic dimensions to the what is happening at the biological level. And this knowledge we don't get from anywhere else. So this is very important. So ashaucha, austerity, rest, self-purification process, celebration. So these are the 5 key ideas that are present in our text, that are at the heart of the Bharatiya discourse on menstruation. And I will like to spend some more time to explain this because of how much misconception it is. Now, the current narrative is, again, we all know that it is said that women are degraded by calling them impure during menstruation. So the term impurity is of English language, and it carries lot of moral, lot of baggage, right? So the moment we hear the term impurity, it gives us a lot of negative connotations, right? It saying that women becomes impure during menstruation, immediately our mind registers, oh, women is being degraded, we are associating a kind of moral depravity to the term impurity, that there is some moral judgment that women is inferior or morally sinful or something like that. But this narrative or these ideas, they come from the English term impurity. They don't come from the Bharatiya term called ashaucha. Why? And this was a very interesting thing that I discovered when I was researching for the book, because English is basically a language of the Western culture, a language which is rooted in Abrahamic religious theology, Christian religious theology. And if you read the Bible and biblical narratives, you will see it is in the Christian theology that women during menstruation, they are considered as entering a state of sinfulness. See, the term sin is not ritual impurity. The term sin is a moral designation. It is a designation saying that women is morally corrupt or morally inferior, morally depraved. And that goes back to the story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. The God created Garden of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, and he gave them one instruction, not to eat the tree of knowledge. But the Eve, she was enticed by the snake or something, and she convinces Adam, and both of them pluck the pluck the fruit and eat it. And that was the first sin committed. As a result of it, they were excluded, they were excommunicated, thrown out of the Garden of Eden. And then, uh, uh, this sin is inherited by humans. And because Eve was the first woman and she was the instigator, she has greater, uh, she has, she was a greater sinner, and her sin has been inherited by all human women. So it is this sin that manifests as menstruation. You see, there are two narratives. One is the Indra's narrative, which also speaks about karmic demerit. But here there is a narrative of Adam and Eve, which speaks about sin. But there is completely very different connotation. They may appear similar, but they are not. In the Indra's case, it is a ritual impurity, and the menstruation is overall posited in a positive manner by connecting it to fertility as a sign that women can give childbirth as well. But here in the Abrahamic story, it is about sinfulness. So unfortunately, because we all function in English language, when we read impurity, or when we read in the text, the translations of the books, which translates asha ucha as impurity, we all have this negative idea that it is kind of degrading to women. But the fact is that in the Shastriya Parampara, there is no such moral judgment. Rather, what is happening is, let us briefly look at this chart that I mentioned. One of the names for menstruation in Sanskrita, there are many names. One of the names is Rajashrava. Raja, as I mentioned, is reference to menstruation or menstrual blood. Shrava means flow. So there is a flow of Raja. Rajashrava literally means flow of Raja. What is this Raja? Raja refers to blood, but Raja also refers to Rajoguna. Raja also refers to Rajasic Shakti. Now, coming to Shaucha, Ashaucha, we have to first understand the very term. Shaucha usually translated as cleanliness, purity, etc. Ashaucha, the opposite. Cleanliness is opposite, and opposite of cleanliness, opposite of purity. So we will put it as impurity, etc. But there is deeper narrative here also. There are deeper dimensions to this also. Shaucha, Ashaucha terms also have the dimension of eligibility or ineligibility. So one of the texts say that all actions becomes fruitless if it is not done in a condition of Shaucha. So here the Shaucha term is referring to all the required competences, required features, eligibility criteria. Only when those criteria are fulfilled, then this particular action will give rise to fruit. So the opposite, when those principles are not present, then that eligibility or competency is also not present. That is, those actions will not give rise fruit, give its results. So that is ashaucha. And purely coming to this context of menstruation, we have to understand what shaucha is, what is ashaucha is. Ashaucha, as I mentioned, can be translated as ritual impurity and also has the element of ineligibility for certain actions, most primarily the Vaidika, Agamika, the religious Hindu ritualistic practices. But let us stop here. Let us pause here and understand that in the Hindu conception, we are not just the physical bodies. At an individual level, we are not just this body. We have deeper identity, which our Vedantic text, the Upanishad text, speaks in the terms of three shariras and the panchakoshas. They say that we have a physical body, which is called as stula sharira. We have a very subtle body, or the vital body, the sukshma sharira. And then we have karana sharira, the causal body, the storehouse of all our karmas from our previous lives, which was the cause which created this life for us, this physical and subtle body for us. So in terms of koshas, the same thing is divided into pancha koshas: annamaya kosha, pranamaya kosha, manomaya kosha, vijnanamaya kosha, and anandamaya kosha. For our purposes, let us only consider the physical and the subtle body. Three main koshas, or three main layers, three layers of identity we are dealing with. It is at the physical level, annamaya kosha; at the vital level, the pranamaya kosha, which is subtle; and then the mind, or the manomaya kosha. So shaucha at the physical level is very obvious for all of us. That is hygiene, keeping the body clean, hygiene. And this hygiene also implies that there should not be any excretion. So when we go to toilet, for example, we don't consider it as a clean. This is very basic knowledge. We all know that. This, even our contemporary, our scientific narrative accepts this, right? That is why we clean ourselves afterwards. Similarly, but what happens during menstruation? There is a continuous flow of blood. You may manage the blood using the tampons or pads or whatever it is, but you're not stopping the blood. Right? There is a blood flow. If you're forcibly stopping the blood by taking pills, etc., then that is in itself will have some form of negative effect on your health, your ability to become mothers. It will severely affect all those things. The natural condition is that during periods there is a flow of blood, which is not shaucha in the physical sense also. So there is ashaucha in the physical sense because there is a flow of blood. Then what is shaucha in the pranamaya kosha, in the vital sheath of our body? That there has to be balance of the pranas. So the Ayurvedic texts, the yogic texts, all of them speak about how we have pancha pranas, prana, apana, vyana, udana, samana, etc. And all of these pranas are responsible for different actions of the body. For example, all downward moving principles, happenings in the body, either when you go to toilet or when there is flow of blood during menstruation, all of them are governed by apana vayu. But for the shaucha, all these pranas have to be in a balanced condition. But during menstruation, there is a heightened condition. There is an increased action of the apana vayu to facilitate the removal of the menstrual blood and other things from the body. So then, additionally, because the body had prepared itself to give birth, there is a excess energy in the body. On the failure of conception, those rajasic energies are also removed. So blood is a carrier of Shakti. And there is Rajasic Shakti, Rajo Shakti is also removed during menstruation. So there is a flow of Rajasic Shakti. So recall the name of menstruation in Sanskrita, Rajashrava. There is a flow of Raja. At the physical level, it is blood. At the level of Pranamaya Kosha, it is Rajasic Shakti, the Rajasic energy. And at the Manomaya Kosha, there is a manifestation of anger, irritation, mood swings. In some people, there is increased hankering for sexual intimacy. So all these different women experience these different ways. But irritation and anger, mood swings are very common for most women. This is not something I or anybody else has to do. All the women experience this. Most of the women experience this. But what is shaucha in the case of manomaya kosha? That there should be a calmness of the mind. So consider any spiritual activity, any ritualistic activity, be it puja at your home or going to a temple or performing japa, or performing dhyana. So we all need all this shaucha that I have mentioned at the physical, vital, and the mental level. That physically we have to be clean. That is why we take bath before doing puja. We wash our legs at the and the before entering the temple. There should be balance of the pranas. There should be calmness of the mind. But none of these are there during menstruation. And it is beyond one's control in the sense that, see, these ideas, ashaucha can happen in men and women, both of them, and even in normal conditions, right? So normally, if you have not taken a bath, then that means we are in ashaucha at the physical level. Or if we are too angry, etc., and normally, then that is also ashaucha. But in normal conditions, one can calm oneself down. One can take a bath and remediate. But during menstruation, there is a continuous flow of blood. So taking a bath, etc., makes no difference because there is a flow of blood. With it, there is a flow of rajasic energy, and there is continuous rajoguna in the mind also. So you may try to control yourself, but still it is beyond control. So that is why menstruation has been termed as ashaucha, a state of ritual impurity, wherein it simply means that the state is such that certain actions become unsuitable to women during those 3-4 days, and these women becomes unsuitable to perform certain actions. So ashaucha has only this connotation. It has no moral connotation, no spiritual connotation, no other judgment on women. It does not degrade women. It does not look down upon women or anything like that. It is simply explaining, it is simply a connotation to explain a simple fact that during menstruation, women are in a heightened condition of raja, heightened condition of rajoguna and rajasic energy. As a result of this, certain practices are not good for their health. And she is not eligible for certain practices such as puja, etc. Because for those practices, shaucha, balance of the mind, calmness of the mind, all these are needed to meaningfully engage in those practices. But the narrative in the text does not end by saying, designating menstruation as ashaucha. Rather, it further says that the text explicitly say that women, by entering a temporary period of ashaucha, they remain ever pure. So this is not my words. These are the words from one of the Dharma Shastra texts, one of the Dharma Sutra texts to be specific. They specifically mention, I have mentioned this verse here. Women possess an unrivaled means of purification. They never become entirely impure. For month by month, their temporary uncleanliness, that is temporary ashaucha, removes their sins. Sins is a translation I just copy pasted. Basically, the term used is papam, which is karmic demerit. We don't have a Christian notion of sin. So basically, women's entering temporary ashaucha during menstruation does not make them impure or inferior. It makes them ever pure. That is said by Baudhayana Dharma Sutra. In another Dharma Sutra by Vasishta, it says, women are pure in all their limbs. Soma, Gandharva, Agni imparts to women cleanliness, melodious voice, and purity of all limbs. So menstruation purifies at physical, speech, and mental levels. To attain this level of purity at all the levels, men have to perform lots of tapasya, lots of samskaras, japa, upasana, and purificatory actions. So what comes to men by special effort, they come as a natural process to women through menstruation. So in the Bharatiya conception, therefore, menstruation is a privilege to women as a self-purification tool. So we don't end the narrative by saying that there is ashaucha. See, the ashaucha is in the context of ineligibility to perform certain actions or unsuitability of certain actions during that period, and to describe the ritualistic condition of a woman, just like we describe the biological condition of a woman during menstruation, saying that there is this is the biological process. The unfertilized egg, etc., is being removed. It is removed along with blood, etc. Similarly, there is a description of the ritualistic condition of a woman, namely that she is in a heightened condition of rajas, and that is what ashaucha term signifies. That is what even the very term rajas shrava or rajasvala signifies. Now, coming to purity, there is physical purity, there is pranic purity, and there is also, freedom from impurity of adharmic actions, wrong actions to some extent. So, because of the lack of time, I won't go too detailed. Physical impurity, we know about this, the removes menstrual fluid. But Ayurveda also speaks about removing toxins from the body during periods. Pranic impurity, we discussed, removes excess rajasic energy, brings balance to tridoshas. Again, this comes from the Ayurvedic text. Impurity of adharmic action, this is very important. Manusmriti, the much derided text as anti-women, it speaks about how menstruation the periods frees women from impure thoughts. The adharma or wrong actions or wrong thoughts it's not only at the physical level, at the level of our action. It could be our level of the speech, it could be level of our thoughts also. So Manusmriti says that it purifies women's thoughts, because we don't always have control over our thoughts. We always have, the thoughts, wrong thoughts or harmful thoughts come to our mind. Menstruation purifies women of those thoughts. Vasishtha speaks about how menstruation purifies women's speech. Similarly, at the physical level, I already mentioned about the karmic demerit of non-fertilization of the egg. So that demerit happens because of non-fertilization of the egg, but the menstruation itself, the 3 days periods and the whole thing, that removes that papam on its own. Because the non-fertilization is also a part of the natural process, the menstruation is also a natural process which removes that. And in Vasishtha Dharma Sutra, there is a very important idea that it says that if a victim of rape or sexual assault or any kind of violation, she can get over the trauma of that violation, that huge trauma that occurs from such unfortunate being victim of such unfortunate victim of such heinous crimes, that women can find solace in her periods if she practices that Rajo Dharma as a Rajo Dharma. The periods, perceives periods as purifying, understands the periods as purifying, and orients herself in that, and sincerely practices this Rajasvala Dharma, Rajo Dharma, then she can overcome those trauma. She can free herself from those trauma. So this menstruation related practices, lifestyle practices, what is called as in Ayurveda as Rajasvala Paricharya or as Rajo Dharma, they can free such victims from their trauma. See what a powerful idea it is. We would not even have guessed that such idea, such utility, such way of orientation of our life existed in our Shastra. Because our current narrative is all focused on one element, which is about Ashaucha, that too big without understanding what Ashaucha is, but instead equating it with this Christian notion of sin or moral depravity. And our texts do not stop here. The other ideas are austerity. So the idea was that if women are excluded from puja, etc., because of ashaucha, doesn't it mean that women are excluded from spirituality, from pursuing dharmic practice, from pursuing bhakti to Bhagavan? So the answer to this is in the Shastras itself, wherein the practices for women given during this menstruation, during a period, such as sexual abstinence, one should not anoint oneself. So the women are said to not to do makeup, massage, and all those things, not to sleep on a bed, not to sleep during daytime, not to comb your hairs, on all these things. They're very similar to the practices given for a brahmacharya or a practices given for a ascetic. They are basically ascetic practices. They are actually tapasya. Tapasya means an austerity or a hardship voluntarily undertaken. And tapasya has a very technical definition as a indriya nigraha, that is restrainment of our voluntary restrainment of the body, mind, and our senses, so that we can loosen their control on us, so that we can develop viveka, vairagya, etc., needed for our spiritual welfare. All the upasanas, vratas, all the other methods are all tapasya methods. And menstruation, this Rajaswala Paricharya, is also one kind of tapas. So it is a dharmic method that can lead one to overall well-being. That is what I mentioned in the beginning, right? So this is the real meaning. These practices, if one is able to really practice them diligently, month after month during their periods, then they not only can help one to overcome trauma, they can help one to purify one's thoughts, one's speech, etc. They help one to control one's desire, develop detachment to worldly comforts. So this practice itself is a spiritual practice. So the menstruation or menstruation related practices are not depriving women of spiritual welfare. Rather, they themselves act as a method to attain spiritual welfare. And the notion of rest needs no explanation. Many of these ideas that the Shastras clearly speak about how during these periods, the 3 days, the women should take rest. They should not physically exert themselves in any kind of physically intense activities, be cooking in the house or intense household activities or sports or whatever it is. Women should take rest. Ayurveda very stresses on this. It suggests a list of lifestyle practices for menstruating women, which includes avoiding physical exertion and taking rest, so that imbalance of the doshas within the body is prevented. This imbalance in the doshas can itself leads to multiple health issues. So they want to avoid that. Next, the final dimension is why celebrate menstruation? Menstruation is deeply connected to childhood, childbirth, fertility, etc. Menstruation, the onset of menstruation is also, it is celebrated in different communities across India. Just even 200, 300 years back, the celebrations were prevalent across the length and breadth of India among various communities. And I have documented many of them in the book. But unfortunately today, this is present more in southern Indian communities, especially in Tamil Nadu, to some extent in Karnataka and Andhra Pradesh, Telangana also. In Sanskrit, it is called as Ritukala Samskara. So when the menarche happens, the first at the onset of menstruation, there is a celebration at home. There is a ritual that marks the transition of a girl from a child, a Kumari, into a Kanya Avastha. And this Ritukala Samskara is has its parallel for the boys in the form of Upanayana, which marks the transition of boys from childhood to a state of brahmacharya. For the boys, however, after this Upanayana, they have to perform lot of every day. They have to perform the Sandhya Vandana, etc. as a purificatory processes. But for the Kanyas, the monthly periods itself acts as purifying method that I mentioned earlier already. Menstruation marks the fact that women will be has grown up biologically, has entered the age wherein her body will eventually be able to bear children. Therefore, it marks as a transition, as their eligibility to enter Grihastha Dharma. Grihastha means the stage of marriage, the stage of marital life, wherein they can perform their full-fledged aspects of Stri Dharma, including entering motherhood, etc., which are very unique to them. So this celebration, the Ritukala Samskara and etc., imparts a very positive perception of menstruation to the young girl. The girl is supposed to be welcomed with open hands into womanhood. It also helps her to appreciate various menstruation practices and importance. So the purpose of these celebrations was to posit menstruation in a positive manner, in a meaningful manner, not as a meaningless process that women is supposed to go month after month, whether she likes it or not, right? Rather, to perceive this all-important biological process, to find meaning in them, to understand the ritualistic importance, the spiritual importance, the social importance, the cultural importance of that practice. And one of the most unique aspect of this is that we have different deities, different devatas, different devis who are intimately associated with menstruation. Deities of menstruation, and this is unique, not just unique to Hinduism, but also in most polytheistic cultures across the world. Even the Greeks had their deities of menstruation, such as Artemis, etc. The Romans had Diana. The Egyptians also had deities associated with menstruation. The Mesopotamians had Inanna and Ishtar, etc. In Hindu Dharma, among all the forms, the Devi's form, the Parvati's form, in the different forms of Parvati are especially associated with menstruation. For example, during Navaratri, we celebrate Navadurgas, right? We have this famous shloka, Pradhamam Shailaputri, Dvitiyam Brahmacharini, right? So the 9 forms of Durga, the first 5 forms represent or associated with or indicate the 5 stages in a woman's life. Shailaputri is a child, the daughter of the mountain Himalayas child. Brahmacharini is a Kanya, just like Brahmacharya, the female form is Brahmacharini. Then comes Chandraghanta. Even the arrangement is in that form. Shailaputri, then Brahmacharini, then Chandraghanta. Chandraghanta is, she is wearing Chandra. Who wears Chandra? It is Shiva. So she has become the half of Shiva. So she is also wearing the Chandra, marriage. Kushmanda is pregnancy. Skanda Mata is motherhood. Skanda Mata, the mother of Skanda, right? So Brahmacharini is especially associated with the phase of Kanya, wherein she has started menstruation. The menarche, the onset of menstruation has happened. There are, in the Dharmashastra text especially, certain forms of Devi are worshipped for, in the case of there are some doshas, there are some ritualistic doshas with respect to menstruation. Devis are worshipped to relieve that girl of those doshas, to protect her. We have great festivals, in Assam, the Ambubachi festival is perhaps the most famous, wherein the Kamakhya Devi has her yearly periods. For 3 days, the temples are closed to let her rest. In Odisha, we have the Raja Parba. Here, Raja again means menstruation. wherein Harachandi, again a form of Devi, Harachandi is worshipped. She's considered to be undergoing that yearly cycle of menstruation. I've quoted in the book Anthropological Studies, wherein the practitioners of this festival, they believe how the human menstruation is a reflection of the imitation of the cosmic process. And all the women, by going through this menstruation and practicing menstruation related rituals and practices, they are partaking in the cosmic order, the cosmic menstruation of the mother, which maintains the order, the peace and order in the cosmos. So for them, menstruation, therefore, is not simply a biological process. It is a cosmic process. It is a process which maintains the order of the universe. You see how meaningful it is for them than for a urban, educated youngster who sees no meaning in menstruation. So there are many such practices across India. Just a brief about Ayurvedic aspects. We already saw some of the ideas from Ayurveda, but the most important idea from Ayurveda is that it defines normal menstruation as one which is without pain, without burning sensation, neither having very scanty not excessive blood coming out. But the normal experience or the everyday experiences of most women today is that it is either painful or it is has lot of uh, discomfort, or there is many people suffer from excessive blood, many suffer from very scanty bleeding. So these are all this, the modern medicine gives different names for these conditions, whether the women is suffering from excessive bleeding or too less bleeding, and you go to them, they will give all these medicines and drugs to rectify them. All this happens. But the Ayurveda defines that a normal menstruation is when all these things are not there. It should be painless, it is without any discomfort, and the flow has to be normal. And it says such normal menstruation occurs when the three doshas are in a proper balanced state. There is no abnormality there. And Ayurveda prescribes a series of do's and don'ts. It's a kind of a lifestyle practice called Rajaswala Paricharya. Paricharya means the lifestyle practice during menstruation, during the monthly periods, that will ensure, when practiced for a prolonged period, it will ensure that the periods will be normal, in the sense that it will be painless, without discomfort, the blood flow, etc., will be normal as it should be. Because these practices help to bring the doshas into their balanced state from their imbalanced state. So Charaka Samhita says, after the onset of menstruation, for 3 days and nights, the women should observe celibacy, should sleep on the ground, take food with hands from an unbroken utensil, not from metal and such utensils, and should not clean her body in any way. You see, this is very interesting. What the Ayurvedic texts are prescribing from a medical perspective, from a health perspective, they match what the Dharma Shastra and other texts prescribe from a ritualistic perspective, from a dharmika perspective. So that is how the Rajaswala Paricharya has all these dimensions of ashaucha, of purification, of tapasya, of rest, and of medical health. All of them combined into a comprehensive practice called Rajodharma or Rajaswala Paricharya. We won't go into detail. These are some of the practices. You can read my book. These practices have been mentioned. And what is very important is, there have been certain studies, I have quoted one or two in my book, certain studies wherein a group of young women who were suffering from various menstruation-related issues, they were made to practice this Rajaswala Paricharya, including observing celibacy, not sleeping on the on the bed, etc., and especially the restrictions related to food and not using metal containers and many other things. Here you see, concentrate on auspicious things. That is also an important thing. One should not be too much mentally agitated during those times. So this partial isolation of women, which is suggested, it is also because when we are continuously interacting with people, somebody says this, somebody says something else happens. There is always mind in a stress. A partial isolation rest ensures that the mind one can focus on auspicious things, so one can take rest, and stress can be kept minimum, etc. So this test that a group of young women were made to who had complaints of various problems related to menstruation, they were made to practice this Rajaswala Paricharyas, the do's and don'ts, for a period of 8 to 10 months or something. And at the end each month, it was their symptoms were monitored, and after 6 months or 8 months, many women found that many of the symptoms have completely vanished. Many found great reduction in those symptoms. So this has been scientifically, observationally uh, uh, established that these do's and don'ts are not just musings of some unlearned in the past, some text saying something. It's not like that. They are useful. They have been found to be useful in clinical study even today. So before concluding, I have just two more final slides. I want to bring to your attention this very important aspect that I have been mentioning throughout this presentation here and there, that it is important to see where the modern narrative of menstruation is coming, and what are its ideological basis, and what are its consequences. So till now we have been using the Eurocentric lenses to critique Hindu practices without even understanding the Bharatiya perspective, the philosophy, and the rationale behind those practices. But it is also equally important to logically understand the ideological basis of the Eurocentric views, the contemporary views on menstruation, and understand the problematic nature of them also, and critique them also. So if you see what is the one common element of these contemporary views of menstruation, it is that it is rooted in modern scientific world. So they posit this as something which is positive. But what is actually happening? This so-called scientific modern worldview is basically derooting menstruation, delinking menstruation from its cultural dimensions, from its sacred dimensions. All non-physical ideas or all non-physical principles that are in function is being uh, posited as superstition, as a taboo, as reducing it to negative, therefore thereby reducing menstruation to simply being a series of set of negative notions such as pain, cramps, unavoidable physiological process, and annoyance to overcome through drugs, etc. So very presence of these drugs, etc., to overcome, uh, to miss your periods, has this idea behind it that modernity posits menstruation as a purely biological phenomenon from whose enslavement one must free themselves from using drugs, tampons, and sanitary pads, etc. It is not something I am making up again. This is something which is in front of our eyes. In America, you have brands of the sanitary products such as Freedom. In India, we have brands such as Stay Free, Whisper, etc. We say the contemporary narrative says that Hinduism or our culture induces shame in women regarding menstruation. But what is the reality? We celebrate our menstruation. There is Ritu Samskara, wherein we basically announce to society that our daughter has started menstruating. We have our devatas, our devis, the Kamakya to Harachandi to Bhumi Devi to others who are considered as goddesses of menstruation. Where is shame? Natural shyness is being misinterpreted as shame. If a girl finds it uncomfortable to speak about a phenomenon which is too intimate to her, there is no shame in it. It is natural shyness. To speak about it to a stranger, it is shyness. If somebody comes and asks, a stranger comes and asks us about our sexual activity, are we comfortable to speaking about it? Does it make it shameful or is it discomfort? We just don't want to share what is personal to us. But on contrary to that, the real shame is being kind of psychologically decoded, encoded into people's mind through the very brand names such as Stay Free and Whisper. What should one stay free from? Why is a brand called is called as Stay Free when it is about managing blood? The underlying message is that menstruation is kind of a bondage, and women should somehow overcome that bondage, free themselves from that bondage. And here is a product which helps her to free from the bondage or the restrictions caused by menstruation. Whisper is another idea. Whispering, speaking in a soft voice, in a secret. Is it not something that induces shame? But more important aspect is that the obsession with a particular scientific biological narrative of menstruation has alienated women from their own bodies and bodily experiences. They have prevented women from discovering a positive meaning to the process as part of this self-discovery. All cultural knowledge, all subjective experiences, all spiritual ideas and practices have been reduced to false beliefs and superstition. And in the name of freeing women from cultural taboos, modern scientific education is promoting unscientific practices that are harmful to health, such as positing, indulging in running, swimming, etc., physically intense practices as something which is freedom. We all see these ads in the TV, right? Some girl who is a champion, who is an athlete, but because of periods, she's prevented from competing in something, and then she's able to compete there and win gold medals by using sanitary napkin, right? So these are very deep ideas, very subtle ideas that are being put into the minds of the young women, that menstruation is somehow a discomfort. It is something which creates, which prevents women from living a good life. So these are all negative attitudes that is being put in front of women. On contrast to this, our Hindu Dharma, our Bharatiya Sabhyata, posits menstruation as a positive, austere, purifying, and healing process, encourages people to celebrate it, provides a framework for women to positively process their menstrual experiences and celebrate their womanhood. To conclude, so this is from one of the page from my book, the last one of the final entries from my book. The Ayurveda and the Dharma Shastras provide many practices, do's and don'ts. Some of them it may not be possible in contemporary life when we are all living in a very fast life, a very unhealthy life, so to speak, or very stressful life to practice all of them. We are all busy with our work, going to office, going to colleges, schools, etc. But some of them can be practiced all the time, and all of them could be practiced at some point or the other, even if not continuously. Especially the restrictions related to food, during periods, etc. It is better to avoid junk food, better to avoid meat and other heavy foods. It is best to eat only very light food and eat in a very light quantity, especially if food made of barley, milk, ghee, etc., home cooked foods. This is something everybody can do, irrespective of their background or conditions, etc. The food restriction is something, the food regulation is something that all women, all girls can implement. Observing celibacy is also something that is possible. How we sleep is again something that is all very much possible. Sleeping on a mat or a charpoy is very much possible. Self-adorning is something may not be possible. If say if you have to go to office and etc., you cannot avoid taking a bath, but at least a head bath can be avoided, or perhaps a full bath is avoided and replaced by simpler means. At least a body massage, etc., or cutting the nails, etc., can be avoided, if not other things. Some of them, it can be tailor made, that the women individual has to discover what is possible for them, what is not. Physical work is again something, at least works that are of great physical exertion, running, traveling, cooking, household activities, any fatigue work, it should be avoided to the best of one's possibility or whatever is practical. Mental stress, likewise. I think in many offices, 1 day leave or 2 day menstrual leave are also available in some offices, or work from home options can be explored. Mental stress is something that has to be focused on as much as possible, because uh, the key to a good health is always the mind. Religious activity is another thing that is very much possible, irrespective of your day-to-day conditions. Avoiding performing any kind of religious and spiritual activities, rather trying to have an attitude that the menstruation related practices itself is a tapasya, and following that is something which is very much doable, even in a fast moving society where many things may be difficult, but some things can be practiced regularly, some of the things occasionally. Ultimately, what is needed is an understanding that these are for the benefit of women rather than to restrict women. So I hope I was able to communicate this idea. I'm open to questions. Just before you open the floor, I just want to share this. This is my new book, Chatushloki Manusmriti, an English commentary. This was released this April 2025. There is a lot of misconceptions about Manusmriti, just like with menstruation also. So if you want to have uh, uh, a gateway to understand Manusmriti, to understand a larger Dharmashastra tradition, this is the book you should go. It gives a detailed explanation, reflection, and commentary on the opening 4 verses, just the 4 verses, but through that, it tries to give a overview of a gateway into understanding the rest of the Dharmashastra tradition. You should definitely check it out. It is available on Amazon and other platforms. It's called Chatushloki Manusmriti, an English commentary. Thank you very much. This is my email ID. I'm active on Facebook, Twitter, etc. You can follow me there. On LinkedIn also. Thank you again. If you have any questions, I'm happy to take. Namaste. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha.
Bhavika, please speak the question.
Yeah, so there's a question from Ishan Chavan. So there a lot of times question is asked why in temple Bali can be given then just a second. Um,
Bali can be given. Why can't menstruating
yeah.
women go? Okay. A very, very interesting question. So, Bali is basically a. Actually, there is no connection between the two, to be frank, except for the fact that in a Bali also, when the Pashu is Bali is given, I think that is what they're referring. There is a flow of blood, and here also flow of blood. There is two things here. Pashu Bali is also not given inside the temple, that is in the Garbhagriha. There is a designated spot outside of the main premises of the temple where the Pashu Bali is given. And later, of course, the blood itself taken as the Naivedyam for the Devata. This happens mostly in the Shakta temples, not in other places. But there, the practices are again governed by the traditions and the ritual mechanisms of the temple. So the Shastras, the Tantra Shastras, or even texts such as Kalika Purana, specifically mention that certain forms of Devi are Balipriya, Raktapriya, right? So these deities, they love that blood. They love that Bali. So just like we offer food, a cooked sweet to a deity, a cooked a meat or a bali, the blood is also like that. But menstruating women going and that it is not connecting because these are all two different phenomena. A woman in menstruation is in a heightened condition of rajas. It is not just about any blood flow. The menstrual blood is of a unique in nature because it has rajasic energy in it. It has it is called as Rajas Rava, right? It is not just blood also. We all know from our biology that there is the removal of ama toxins, there is removal of uterine, the lining has been removed, the unfertilized egg has been removed. So all these things are in the menstrual blood. So these are two different things. Women are going there when we go to a temple, we go as a devotee, right? So we have to be in a state of shaucha to go to a temple and worship. Bali it's not that goat is going to a temple during its menstruation, right? We are giving the bali of a goat or whatever animal as Naivedya. And there also you cannot give any goat or anything. There are also restrictions and prescriptions there also. It has to be a certain kind of animal, certain prescriptions are there. Nothing in the ritual field is accidental or random. There are clear Shastriya guidelines of how a ritual has to be done because the fruit of the ritual are adrushta, that is invisible. That is, we cannot see it from the eyes. Fruit will come to us, but we cannot see it with the eyes. Like the Vedic statement is, you perform this yajna, you will attain swarga. You cannot see the swarga with your eyes now. After the death of the body, you will go to Swarga and enjoy there whatever it is. But you cannot see it now. It is not empirical. So if you cannot modify the rituals to our likings. If there need to be modification of rituals, the alternatives has to be come from the Shastra Pramana itself or from the Pramana of the Shishtas who have practiced those rituals, who have attained the siddhi of those rituals. Right? So these are not connected. I hope you are able to understand the difference, that they are not connected. Any other questions?
भाविका बोल दो.
And there's another question from Rama that you mentioned that menstruation helps in self purification. What happens when stops at a certain age?
Nothing happens. That process ends. So that is obvious, right? So it is a biological process. It has a certain duration. It starts at particular age and it ends at a particular age. And so whatever the ritual state, the both the pros and cons of that will end after that menopause, right? So the pros is, of course, the as a purification method that you mentioned, that will not be there. The cons is also that the discomfort, etc., will also be not there. So after that, during the time when the women is menstruating, they are unable to do these elaborate vratas, etc., because of menstruation, because it breaks the sadhana, that all the long period sadhana. Usually there is a break. So the full fruit of that sadhana will be unable to come. But after post menopause, the women are able to undertake those longer vratas, longer sadhanas, etc. So that is the pros. The cons is that the purification imparted by the this one, the method of menstruation is not there, and that is fine. I mean, there is nothing problematic. It is the nature of the how the things are.
There's another question. In the early time when there were no sanitary pads, how did women deal with or how did they manage?
So they dealt with it because the across the world, not just in India, during periods, women used to maintain some form of isolation, separation. It could be a outhouse, it could be a room, a separate room within the family, or sometimes in some villages, usually many young girls and women, there is this notion called synchronism of menstrual periods. When women live together, there is often multiple people have their periods together. So they used to, in a village, there used to be a separate place wherein women who were having periods, they come and live there during those 3 4 days. So all food, etc., would be provided for them, for the rest of the family or the rest of the village. They used to be there. So they had their isolation, their from the free time, freedom from their day-to-day rigorous, very hardships, day-to-day activities. They used to become free from all forms of social responsibilities, individual family responsibilities, and all. So they had their free time. So see, what is happening is, in the current narrative, when an ancient society or ancient civilization, or particularly when in our case, if a Hindu society or a Hindu village or Hindu practice, they do this kind of separation and those practices, then it is seen as regressive. But in the US, in the recent times, there has been, you can go do a Google search called red tent movement. Basically, it is a feminist movement, actually, where the women, some women come together during their periods. They stay with other women having periods, and they take it as their assertion of their femininity, assertion of their freedom and free time. The same thing that happens in a traditional society is regressive, is repressive of women, and the same thing that happens in a Western liberal society is posited as freedom, as equality, as this and that. You see, so we have to. This is how the narrative is built. But in the ancient times and all, before, in a pre-modern time, to be more specific, the women had. We had these joint family things and all. So if one woman used to take rest, the other would, other family members would be taking family responsibility. So she had lot of rest, and she isolated herself from all the activities. She withdrew from all activities, basically.
There's another question. As we know from the story of Sati Ma, her menstruational period is worshipped as people treat the cloth as a part of offering. But at the same time, people see periods as something to not talk about. For example, when we buy pads, they're covered in black bags so others can't see. So, impurification isn't mostly a concept introduced by patriarchal society and victimization of women that they are so weak they cannot work.
Okay, I'm not sure what the question is. I did not understand the last part, but but basically, see, you're comparing a contemporary happening. What is happening? So this black bags and all. Is it really because of religious notion of ashaucha? It is not, right? You cannot blame our culture or our dharma for a simple act that a shopkeeper puts the sanitary pads in a black bag. He is doing that for the comfort of the women because that is how most women are feel comfortable. Because as I mentioned, it is something which is intimate, it's personal to women, and nobody wants to likes to exhibit those things, and that is perfectly fair, is what I think. Now, even if you have to impute some notion of impurity or something like that, that also has to be traced back to the modern inducement of the notion of shame by the very term such as that I mentioned, the very term of a sanitary product is stay free, etc. So these are all modern ideas that are there. You cannot superimpose that into traditional societies or traditional practices and call all of them as somehow patriarchal and victimization of women and all those things, right? In a traditional society, we celebrate menstruation. There are even today there are celebrations of Ambubachi festival that have all over the place. People go there for that festival. Where is the taboo there? Where is the shame there? Even today, in many communities have retained the practice of Ritukala Samskara, which is basically announcing to your immediate society that your daughter or your sister has started her menstruation. We should not, at one place, we should understand that we should not mistake shyness to shamefulness. What the boundaries, the personal boundaries that individuals draw. At the same time, we should also recognize that there is also an attempt in the contemporary discourse to induce some form of shame, also at the same time also saying that we are against all forms of shamefulness. So there is a lot of complex kind of narrative that is being there. We have to understand that also. But if you purely study the religious practices, the cultural practices in Bharata itself, there has hardly been any shamefulness associated with it, any victimization associated with it. What the practices which are today being branded as victimization were never seen as victimization then at all. We have very great evidence of this in the Mahabharata. During the Vastraharana episode, when Draupadi was dragged into the court, Draupadi was in her periods. She was in her Ekavastra. And when she was called to the court, she clearly says that I am in a state of Ekavastra, I'm in a state of seclusion, I'm in a state of Vida, and this is my right to be in that. How insulting it is to me, how dare they insult me by calling me to the court at this time? How disrespectful it is to call me to the court at this state of mind. She did not see being in a state of practicing menstrual isolation as something victimization. She saw it as a privilege, as a right, and forcing her to come to the court at that moment as an violation of her privilege, violation of her right, violation of her dignity. So when it is very important to understand where these caricatures are coming, where these designations are coming, what are the ideological basis of these contemporary descriptions or of certain practices. So if we have to understand our practices on its own basis, we have to first strip ourselves, decolonize ourselves of these Eurocentric ideas that we are taught from a very young age. So our whole schooling system is basically a colonization of our minds and putting into our minds all these Eurocentric ideas. That is what, unfortunately, the reality is.
Thank you, sir. There are no more questions. I thank you for this wonderful session, and I thank all the participants for joining us and asking questions. I hope you all got your answers. Okay, so we have another question. Do women have mood swings during periods? I have seen a lot of times that my ex okay. Um, I have seen a lot of times that his friend consumes chocolate which contains caffeine during the period. Why is that so?
I don't have the answer about the caffeine part. I think you should ask your ex only. But the fact is, women will themselves tell you that they have mood swings, they have some irritation, they have anger issues during menstruation. Many women, may not every woman experience it. From what the Ayurvedic texts tell us is that, see, and even the other texts, the reason for most of this is, biologically there is imbalance of tridoshas, but at a deeper level there is what I mentioned, that in the manomaya kosha, at the level of the mind, there is a heightened condition of rajoguna. So the mind is in at a state of rajasic, uh, uh, guna is in a heightened condition. As a result of this, all this anger, mood swings, etc., kind of peak during those times. So that is how, why many women, a large section of women, experience these symptoms during the periods. And sometimes, some perhaps I think this chocolate and etc. Tries to helps to kind of deal with that in some way or the other way. Again, I am not an expert in the chocolate aspect, so you should check it out. If there are any scientific study on this matter.
No more questions, sir. Thank you.
And I might add that this book, The Menstruation Across Cultures, is also available on Amazon across all Amazon geographies, including outside India. And anybody interested can check out the book. I think it's a very detailed study, and most of your questions from the sessions, even if I have not answered it, you will definitely find answers in my book. Do check it out. It's called Menstruation Across Cultures, a Historical Perspective. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you to all the participants for joining us. Thank you, everyone. You can leave the meeting.